And we're live. Okay, good morning, everyone. Devi here. We're going to have a nice conversation with Danny.
Yes.
Danny, welcome.
Thank you.
I'm going to introduce quickly Danny for those listening. Danny is a software engineer. He's a freelance. He's a speaker. He's a writer. I got to discover his work probably 3 weeks ago.
I think so, yeah.
When you wrote this article about using the DOM like a pro.
Exactly.
And the article went viral on the Medium, on IT Next on Medium. I will put the link on the podcast. And then after talking with you for a while, I realized that you've been doing a lot of stuff, but you turned to be a software engineer not because it was planned, but you started with a different career and then you transitioned towards software engineering.
Yeah.
Okay, let me welcome you again, and
Thank you.
I want to know more about you. Let's people know who you are, and after that we're going to talk about the article, and why did you write that, and what was what triggers that article and everything else you're doing so far. Yeah, we have a lot of stuff to talk about. So go ahead. Who are you, Danny?
Like you said, I'm Danny. I'm a software engineer. I've been working as a software engineer for about 11 years now.
Amsterdam-based?
Amsterdam-based, yes. Yeah. I've been doing all kinds of stuff. I've done Cold Fusion. That's where I started with.
Yeah.
I've done PHP, and I started freelancing about 4 years ago. And then I just started to focus, or I decided to focus only on JavaScript, because that's what I enjoy most and I think has the most future. So that's exactly what I'm doing now. Like you said, I'm a tech writer. I write for Medium and the LogRocket blog. I speak at meetups. So I'm quite busy at the moment.
Yeah, indeed.
And now I'm here.
I want to go back to that story because I think it's interesting for people listening or watching to know that a career in IT doesn't have to be defined by the degree or the background in computer science you will have. So can you tell us a little bit your trajectory from where you started?
Yeah, sure. I can tell you. I don't have a computer science degree. I didn't start like that. I actually I was running a radio station from 1997 till 2002, and at a certain point we had to quit the radio station because we weren't making enough money.
Yeah.
And at the time I already had the idea to continue my career as an independent consultant, just helping a radio station get better.
Yeah.
I had quite some experience and knowledge about radio, so I wanted to do that. But in order to do that, I sell my services. I needed to have a website, so I had no money at all. We just quit the radio station; the money was gone. So I had to get a website. So I started looking around, Googling like how do you do that, and then I found you can buy these templates, and then you have to fiddle around and then do just create your own website out of it. So I started doing that with the front page program at that time.
Yeah.
And while I was doing that, I realized like, wow, this is really nice. I really like this. I got into HTML and CSS were coming around, a little bit of JavaScript. So I really started to enjoy doing that. And it reminded me also, because when I was a kid around, I think 9 or 10 years old, my parents bought me this Atari home computer. I don't know if you remember those from the 80s.
Yeah,
and
indeed.
That computer had BASIC, so you could I could program on it. I would buy these magazines. Then you had like these listings. You had to type the whole program. It took you like 2 hours. There was no hard disk, nothing. So as a kid, I really enjoyed that, but I never really thought about later on in life like
that could be a career path.
Exactly. There was no internet, nothing, so I didn't really think about it. But when I was trying to become a radio consultant and I was building the website, that triggered me again, like, hey, I remember I loved doing this as a kid, so maybe this is something I should do.
Yeah.
And I realized I want to be a programmer. I don't want to be involved in radio stations anymore. So that's how I started, just in my spare time coding. And then at a certain point,
you got hooked.
Yeah, I thought to myself, listen, if I'm gonna do this now, I need to apply for a job now. I was working at Honeywell at the time. I was selling fire equipment.
Wow.
Completely different as well. So I realized, like, listen, if I want to do a career change, I have to do it now. I was about 35, 36 at the time.
Yeah.
So I did it, and I went to this really small company, just 2 bosses and me. I was the only employee, and they gave me the chance to learn, and yeah, that's how it started.
Yeah,
that's
amazing.
When it took off. Yeah,
amazing. I think it's important for people to understand that it's always possible to make that career change, and even better today because you have all these schools that were not there 10, 15 years ago, where you could go and spend these 3, 4, 6 months into this program and then become a pretty solid developer and then start building up from there. Amazing. And how do you keep yourself like afloat, learning and then growing? Because you actually went from that raw JavaScript, HTML, CSS, and then you had this CMS-ish platform.
Yeah, exactly.
And then from there you grew into becoming who you are today, freelance, working at ING in Amsterdam with custom element, web component, doing open source and all this stuff. How do you keep yourself, like, how do you learn, and what
well,
is your
if your heart is really in it, it's quite easy to learn. For me, it doesn't even feel like learning. So I admit I spend way too much time behind my laptop. But when you really enjoy it, there's no problem in sitting on your sofa at night and just going to the internet and reading some articles and stuff and trying out. I really love programming, so I'm always busy with it, doing stuff, trying stuff out, and then it just comes naturally. I read all kinds of all the weekly newsletters. I read articles every day on Medium, everywhere, and you pick up stuff if you work in open source or you contribute to something or you work on this or that. Then it just comes naturally. Yeah. If you are really interested in it, it doesn't feel like learning. It's just like
you're just feeding your curiosity and then keep on growing that.
Exactly, yeah.
And then you learn, and then you start sharing.
Yeah,
that's where it's gonna take us to the blog post, you being a writer. Mm-hmm. So how did you start? At which point you felt like, okay, I think this. I need to share that with the world, or this thing I need to make it available to other people?
Well, let me say, when I was running that small company as a radio consultant, I was also blogging at that time. So I think it's also in my personality to always want to share knowledge. So when I started as a web developer, I also was running a simple WordPress blog. And then at a certain point, I didn't have time for it anymore. And now lately, I was thinking, also as a developer, as a freelance developer, you have to think about your PR as well. You just have to be out there if you really want to get some leads and stuff. So it cuts both ways. You can share the knowledge and you can maybe get leads out of there. It's really interesting. And also when you teach, you learn as well.
Yeah.
It's like a cycle, because then when you start to teach, you start writing a blog post, you realize that there's also a lot of stuff that you don't know, or that you don't know, you're not really sure about, so you have to look it up.
The way you thought of it, maybe it's a bit different, and then you get all this feedback like from people probably who have more experience with it, and they'll be like, that's not true. That's the way it should be. Exactly. It should be. I actually had this thing with I was posting a snippet of code on LinkedIn, and then someone told me about I was just trying to show how to write a map function with reduce, and then someone said it's possible to do that, but that's missing the point of having a map going from a vectorial shape to a vectorial shape versus a reduce that goes from a vectorial shape to a scalar shape. And I never seen, even though I love functional programming, I never realized this aspect of those two functions.
Yeah, exactly.
And then you learn from there. Yeah. But the main point was to share that, hey, this is possible. And then someone comes and says, well, guess what? That's not the point. That's not the way you should be doing it. I was like, tell me more.
Yeah.
So share, but I like that. So then you wrote this article. I would just take the. You wrote this article about writing using the DOM like a pro.
Yeah, exactly.
I was early September, and then it went on Medium, on IT Next, and people just went like, this is it. This is something we should be doing often. Where the inspiration comes from?
Well, I've always been really into standard stuff. I like I said, at night I go to the internet. I spend quite some time on the Mozilla Developer Network, where they have it's like a internet manual.
Yeah.
So all the dumb stuff is there, and then you really start to discover new things. And I always like to strive first to use like a standard solution before reaching for a framework or something.
Okay.
I'm really not anti-framework or anti-libraries or whatever, but I really like to use the standard stuff. And when I was researching that, like what is all possible, I was also surprised, like, hey, wow, we can, with standard functionality, we can do almost jQuery-like things. You can just take a raw HTML string like you would normally do with jQuery with the $sign function and create an element out of it.
Yeah.
Whereas normally you would have to do document, create element, and it's like 6 lines of code. I realized that with a lot of standard DOM methods, you can do the same thing. And sometimes even better than what these libraries do.
Yeah, because they have it natively embedded.
Yeah, so I was pretty amazed with that as well. So I just started collecting some stuff, researching, and I found even more. And then I started to write the article about it. And to be honest, I didn't really expect too much. I always have some articles ready as drafts, and then I publish them later. I polish them a little bit.
Yeah.
I never expected this article to blow up. There was actually another article about data binding for web components, and I thought, this is going to be it. This is going to be a great article. And it really didn't do that well. It's getting better now, but this article, like you said, it just blew up, and I was really amazed.
Yeah.
And what amazed me even more is like when you write these articles, people can highlight the stuff, so they can do their own highlights and save it. And as an author, you can see which parts get highlighted and which are the most popular parts. And it's really amazing. You see like these small implementation details that people highlight over and over again. Sometimes you write and you think like, that's too obvious. People know this, but they really don't.
I like the too obvious part. Like people think when you write this thing, when I saw it, my first reaction was like, that's possible. But then as a coach, as an instructor, I also realized that, it is not that obvious for everyone, because for most of people, like you have this huge wave of junior software engineer developer coming in. And for them, developing a web app, it's React, it's Angular, it is all those framework, and then they don't realize that some of the stuff they can actually do it directly in the DOM.
That was also one of the main motivations to write the article, to show people what is possible with standard DOM methods. And like I said, I'm really not anti-framework or anti-libraries, but I also have the feeling like people just they don't ask themselves anymore like, should I use a framework? It's like, which framework am I going to use? And I think that 99% of applications, they won't need Redux or React or whatever. They are fantastic tools, but you really should think beforehand if you want to invest all that time in learning a new tool that will bring a lot of complexity when maybe your application is so small, you don't even need it.
Yeah.
And that's what I started doing lately. I just built my blog. It's not that complicated, but I did it before with React. And then at a certain point, I thought, like, why don't I just do it with standard stuff?
Yeah.
And just with web components. And now I think I have 20% of the code left. And it's even running better.
Wow.
So that's what I want to urge people. It's fine to use frameworks. Just always use the right tool for the right job.
For the job, yeah.
For which job you need it, but think beforehand before you reach for a framework if you really need it, because most of the times
you don't.
I think you won't.
Yeah, that is a very good point. And there is this thing where people just go straight for a framework when they can do it and very simply. And then you also have that wouldn't come as a surprise as a software engineer working with standard technology. You have a huge passion for a PWA.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
So and you gave a talk about it.
Yeah, I gave a talk in Delft for the Dutch or the Delft developers and designers. I was I didn't even know the guy who was organizing it, but he also read one of my prior articles.
Yeah.
And then he thought, like, we're doing this stuff on PWAs. Can you do a talk about it? And that's also something I'm really passionate about, because it's amazing what you can do. The app-like experience you can build with just a regular website, what you can do now. And I also think in the same way that a lot of applications don't need like all these frameworks and stuff, a lot of applications don't even need a native app, or they might be just as good off with their website and just turn it into an app.
Yeah, but for a lot of companies, they will just think like, and I understand their point, saying users are probably not aware yet. As a consumer, they're not aware of, like, oh, they can just turn the web app they have.
No, they are not aware.
So for them, it's like, we still want to reach those people. So let's build this mobile app, and then we're gonna reach more and more people. But I think we're still in this transition.
We are, exactly, absolutely.
Where we need user to be aware of that, the PWA thing, not as a PWA, but just saying, your web app, whatever, Danny.com, you can also have it as an app on your phone.
As an app, yeah.
The day they realize that, I think it will probably change the whole game. But up until then, we still. A lot of companies still invest into.
Yeah, they do. But
I'm curious to know. Yeah, go ahead.
If they really look at at the numbers, also, it's like people are also suffering from app fatigue.
Yeah.
Because I have a few apps on my phone. I don't download any. Most people, they download 0 apps per month.
Yeah, indeed.
They don't download it.
Yeah.
And it's like, I also went to this JavaScript conference, was in early this year, and they also had an app. So I looked in the App Store, and it was like 18 megabyte app or something, and I thought, it's just a website. It's the same information is on the website, and it's in the app, and it doesn't really offer anything in addition to the website. So they might as well have taken care of a good responsive website. Yeah. Luckily, they did. But if you do that, you add a service worker, you add a manifest file, you can have that app.
Yeah. Could you educate me on when should I use a PWA versus a native app today? Build.
Yeah.
I'm talking about building.
I think I saw some other developer asking that question and answering that question as well, and he was a bit humorous about it. He said, there's only one criteria. If your app needs to sell iPhones, then you need a native app. Otherwise, you don't. Well, it's a bit of a joke, of course, but I think you should just start with the baseline. What functionality can I offer with a native app that I could not do with a progressive web app?
Especially because with Apple also released the quietly release
the
support
music,
for support for PWA
they do.
on Safari.
Yeah,
So-
they do. They are really
Okay.
the new iOS has also improved. There's still a lot of stuff is not there. There's no push notifications. You can still not capture your camera. Well, you can. There is camera capture, but it's not like the live, the get user media stuff. So you cannot do live streaming on a progressive web app. If you do it in standalone mode, if you do it not in standalone mode, which means you will still have an address bar, then you can do it. So that might also be an option. But they are improving this stuff, absolutely, yes.
So what were the steps you mentioned? You were starting saying like...
of course. Well, I think you should look if you really have neat functionality that you want to offer to your users that you cannot offer through a progressive web app, then by all means go with a native app. My oldest daughter is now using that TikTok app, and I look at it sometimes. It's amazing what they do with video editing. I don't think you can do that in a browser yet.
Okay.
I haven't really researched it, but if that's the kind of stuff you need, then by all means do a native app. But if you don't need it, you might as well go with a progressive web app. I think that should be the baseline. But before that even, I think as a company, you should also think, do I even need an app in the first place? Do I really need that app?
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of companies, they can just go by with having a good website that just works on mobile devices. And you probably don't even need an app.
Yeah. I see exactly.
There's something that really annoys me. It's also with the Medium app. I also downloaded the Medium app. I think the only benefit is that you can also write your articles on your phone there, because if you do it in Safari or something, it's really hard.
Yeah.
But every time you go to the medium.com website, there's this little banner coming, hey, you have to download the app. It's so annoying. I don't want your app. Just get away from me. Just hide it. Just let me answer it once. I don't want it.
Yeah.
And the most annoying part is even sometimes you go to some website which is not responsive. So it's not optimized for your phone, and it's really hard to navigate. And the only way you can do it is by installing that huge app that doesn't add anything to the experience. So I really think you should look, do I really need that app? And if you don't need it, don't do it.
Yeah.
It's not worth it.
So I'm going to dive into more like article, and so there is a pattern that I when I was researching a bit your trajectory, and there is a pattern that I discover. It's like, so you learn, you share, you write, you talk, and then something you mentioned early on, you said it's part of also creating your space as a developer on the internet.
Yeah, exactly.
But where are you going? What is your trajectory? What will be you in the next
in the next 5 years?
5 years? Is there? Are you doing it just because it has to be done, or you also have a trajectory?
No. If I was just doing it because it has to be done, I wouldn't be able to keep up with it. I think because of course it takes time to do the talks, to prepare the talks, to write the articles, and once you get better at it, of course it's easier. But your heart has to be in it, and my heart is in it. I really like to give back to the community also. So of course it is a business thing for me as well. I want to be out there, and I think in a couple of years' time, I would just be maybe like an independent consultant working for many companies.
Yeah,
I would love that, but at the same time, I would also be more out there, just contributing to open source stuff, creating open source stuff. I don't know, maybe even write a book in the future or something. Because, like I said, it's a cycle. When you teach, you learn as well.
Yeah.
So it's beneficial for everybody, I think.
I think writing a book it's challenging, but it's also rewarding.
I think it is rewarding. It's also like when I wrote my first article about. I wrote an article about that the web components will replace the front end frameworks. Yeah. I think it will be more like a combination, of course. But I also wrote that headline to provoke this discussion, and I even had people going to my blog and filling out the contact form just to thank me for the article, and that really makes my day. If I wake up in the morning, there's an email from somebody from the other side of the world saying, "Oh man, I loved your article. Great, I learned some stuff." Or we downloaded your open source project and now we're using it on our website. That's really rewarding. That's a great feeling.
So I can see that, like, writing books, being an independent consultant, helping companies at scale at the end, because if you can help a lot of companies with your expertise, that is literally that's great, because you can reach more people.
Exactly.
There is you mentioned giving talks.
Yeah.
Do you have any talks coming? Or
no, not that I don't have anything planned at the moment. But that was really something I just I that was the first article I also wrote. And then this old colleague of mine, he said, "Hey, listen, we're going to have a meetup at our company in a couple of weeks. Would you like to do a talk there?" And I said, "Yeah, okay." I said, "Fine, great. I really want to be more out there." But I did some small presentations in all the companies I worked just for some colleagues, but I never really did like a talk for a lot of people. So it was really out of my comfort zone. But I discovered I really enjoy that, because at the same time also I did the talk about web components, and I had like 7 or 8 people coming up to me after the talk like, "Wow, great, and we're going to do this." And there were like more questions coming up. It's really rewarding to do that stuff. Yeah.
I also gave a talk on the web component a few months ago at the Tweaker conference, Tweaker's developer conference in Utrecht at the Fabric. It's great, because at the end of the talk, people like they rushed on the stage like, but I don't think we're ready for that. I'm like, you're not ready for it because you just didn't take the time to look into it.
Exactly,
You feel in the safe zone because of the React and Angular and things that are out there. So it's safe because it's visible. It's highly visible.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the safe zone of this technology. But if you spend time and dive into the web component, you will realize that you're actually in a safe place as well.
Yeah, it is true. It is true.
That was fantastic. So I want to touch on you work at ING.
Yeah.
It's you. What is the size of the team? If it's not,
I work in a Scrum team, so it's about 8 or 9 people now. It fluctuates sometimes.
Yeah.
Sometimes we have some temporary people or people come and go, but it's around 8 people.
Yeah, but then you also have like you need to interact with other teams and stuff like that. So that's grow. What is the most difficult part as a software engineer involved in a team, but that also needs to work cross?
I think it's the communication, and it's the integration and just the interaction between the teams. Because the team that I am in, we work at the chat and video part of the digital banking of ING.
Yeah.
So when you go there, you log on to, if you have an ING account, you log on, you see your account. If you have a problem, there's a button in the corner, you can click it and you can start a chat.
Yeah.
And what we're also now working on, that people can do a video chat on appointment. Like, for example, these mortgage advisors at ING.
Yeah.
They can just send somebody a link, and then at a certain time, they make an appointment, and then they can start a video conversation. That's what we do. But of course, we have to integrate that into that whole platform. And things go wrong. There is a team that takes care of the build of the CI and stuff and the CD. So you constantly have to work with them. And if you have a problem, and let's say that the build is not working, and you have a problem with that, you have to go to these guys and say, "Hey, listen, my build is not working. We cannot release any software right now." But they have a million other problems and priorities as well. So this is really like you're a spider in the web sometimes. You have to work with all these teams together and get them to that common goal, and that can be really hard sometimes, because it's a huge application.
Wow, because I had a TMA, a Teach Me Anything on Netflix. You can find them on Netflix with one of the lead engineer at Zalando, and he was talking about micro front end and how that helps with like big teams and having these open source way of working when you make a pull request to a team and then they have to approve that. And if a team has an issue, if you have an issue but you know it's not truly linked to the project you work on, so you can make a pull request to that team, and then they're the one that needs to
they have to merge it
merge it in their thing, meaning that then you don't wait for the priority part of the other team. You just I can do it. Let me do it.
We do that as well. We do that as well. We use GitLab at ING internally, so we work the same way. We just have all the repos there.
Okay.
And like, for example, if we need to integrate our chat part into the digital banking app, we can just fork that whole app, which is like the umbrella for all the other components. And then we have like this onboarding Git branch that we put our code in, and then we have to submit it to them, and then they have to merge it.
Okay.
But that's the same thing. Sometimes you really need to merge a feature, and then they also have other priorities. Or you're running that build, and there's like a couple of hundred unit tests in there, and then some unit test fails. And then you think like, oh my God, but this is not even my test, but it's failing. So what are you going to do? You can wait for the team, or you can fix it yourself. And that's also what happens sometimes. But there are a lot of dependencies between the teams, and that's sometimes what makes it hard. It makes it exciting also because it's a huge platform, but it's completely different than working at a startup or something, because all of these dependencies, and it goes slower. What you just said about the people resisting to this change, and that they're not ready for some stuff. Did you also notice I posted those snippets on LinkedIn, and there was a lot of comments also from people saying like, "Oh, I don't like the readability. All these arrow functions, it's unreadable."
Yes.
And I'm like, people are so passionate about these little things, but they really have to get used to it.
Yeah.
Because the example I posted also had some currying involved. So you have like higher order functions currying, and it takes some time to get used to. But people are really like, whoa, it's not readable. I don't want that. And it's amazing.
I like the. So that's actually one of the points when I ask you the question about the size of the team. It's because you learn a lot, you discovering a lot of stuff, and I don't think everyone has time or can devote enough time to keep on improving as you do.
No.
So then you come back, you go back to the office the day after, and then you're like, okay, there is this thing.
Yeah.
And there is probably this different way of writing the code, and how do the team react to those changes?
How
do you deal with that?
It really depends. I'm only right now I'm the only front-end developer in the team, because the other ones are all back-end stuff. So we are still looking for good front-enders, but there are not too many at the moment. So usually they think like, okay, this is front-end code, that's his specialty, we'll just do that. But of course there's also a lot of discussion about that, because you have back-end developers who may not write JavaScript code, but they know a lot about architecture. So there is also a lot of discussion about that. And then, in the end, it just comes down to persuading people to do it, or have somebody say, okay, listen, like the product owner will say, we'll just go this way, and that's how it has to be done.
Yeah. And do you have an example of a situation where you thought like, this thing we should be doing it this way, and then you had to
well, when we were doing the chat box, so you have to imagine it's just like a regular chat. It's on the corner of your screen. You have like this chat thing, and then you have like the speech bubbles with the certain messages. And at a certain point, I had a discussion with a colleague because he was taking like a huge object from Twilio. We use Twilio as the backend server, so they provide all the infrastructure for that. Wow. And he was sending like a lot of stuff to this web component through all these attributes. And I said, listen, this is just a message viewer. Let's just give it an array of messages. And then that's just about it.
Display,
but he was like, no, there has to be encapsulation, and everything has to be put in that one component. And I'm all for encapsulation, but in my eyes, this was just the wrong abstraction that he was using.
Yeah.
And that's what you sometimes have heated debates about. But also, like small stuff, like tabs or spaces, 2 spaces, 4 spaces. What are we going to do?
Use Prettier. Use something that's gonna standardize that for you and stop that fight.
Exactly, yeah. Or are we going to use TypeScript or not? That was also a big discussion.
Are you using?
We are using TypeScript now. We were already using it, but then we were using it in a combination with AngularJS, so not the Angular, but the AngularJS. And then, the usage is limited. But when projects grow in size, you can really see the benefit of using TypeScript. It's an amazing tool.
Great. So we have pretty good topics there. What is your next article? What is your next?
My next article, I am writing some stuff about service workers. I said, like I told you, I'm really passionate about the progressive web apps.
Yeah.
But I also think that that every website should have a service worker. I actually already wrote an article about that on the LogRocket blog. But that's what I'm really excited about. You can just take a service worker. It's just a simple script, and you can make your website, even if you don't want to turn it into a progressive web app, you can just make work everything offline. Yeah. It's amazing. That's what I really want to write about. Amazing. And of course, the progressive web apps. I'm also working on a side project to display. It's going to be like a website that will display what progressive web apps are capable of doing today. I'm doing a lot of work on progressive web apps, and at a certain point I thought I just need some testing website so I can see all the features that are available, so I can test it if it's available on Android, if it's on iOS. And then I thought to myself, well, why not just put it out in the open and do it as a project? So that's what I'm working on. Okay. And I will write about that as well. And I always keep a short list of topics that I have. But for example, the other article I wrote about asynchronous programming in JavaScript, that came out of a job interview. I was doing a job interview at ING, and we were interviewing a developer for a senior position. And my colleague asked him some questions about promises and stuff, and that was a bit too heavy for him. And then we decided to make it a bit more simpler. We just said, like, okay, you have this function that works with callbacks, like maybe the file system module in Node.js. Mm-hmm. Can you turn this into a promise-based thing? And then we noticed, like, the guy, he knew more or less the concept, so he wrote down resolve, reject, but the code didn't make any sense. And he was doing it on the whiteboard, so it's fine. You don't really need to write perfect code. But we noticed that he more or less understood it, but not really. So he couldn't really explain the concepts. And then I realized, like, wow, there are so many people out there who just take these abstractions for granted. They see a promise, they know more or less how it works, but they don't really take the time to really get to know this.
To dive into it.
And code, that's what I said at the end of the article, code your own promise. I also did it in the beginning. Yeah. I didn't know how a promise works internally, and I think I don't even understand the details today, but I know the concept now, and it helped me tremendously in really understanding how that stuff works.
Okay. It's that is something I've done a lot to learn stuff, just unpack them and then put them again together, and that's the idea of the AgGem that I told you about. Like you give people something that doesn't work, and then you're like, can you make it work?
Exactly.
But that process there, it goes from, but we have a framework that can do that. So there is a framework that can, but if you can do it now, you realize that what the framework is doing, you can also do it.
Exactly.
That takes away the magic part.
Exactly. But I think that's the right word. When I started working with Angular, you have like the data binding, and you think like, wow, this is magic. This is unbelievable. We can do data binding now. We can have declarative views. But when you really look into the source code, you realize this is not magic at all. This is just straightforward engineering.
Yeah, indeed.
And that's also why I built that web component that does very simple data binding. And I also realized, like, this is quite simple.
Yeah.
The first time I realized that was when I read the JavaScript Ninja. This is the book from John Resig, who created jQuery. And in that book, he really teaches you to write your own jQuery basically. And he really goes through all the steps and all the insights of jQuery. And then you realize, this is actually, you read it and you think like, I could have thought of that, but of course I couldn't at the moment. But when you read it, you're like, wow, this is not magic. This is just straightforward, good programming. And you can do it. You can code your own promise. You can code your own data binding or make your own Redux. It's really not that hard. You just have to dive into it and look into the source code and just do it.
I'm working on these series of like from Redux, so from 0 to hero to 0. So saying like you build, you explain people the problem of like what Redux was trying to solve, implement Redux, then show the limitation, and then start removing Redux, but still have the main application like working, and then people will realize that you don't need it really. But it served a purpose. It was there, and then it helps to solve tons of stuff.
Yeah, exactly. It's a great tool, but you have to realize that React and React in the first place was written for Facebook. Facebook had a problem. They couldn't do this rendering anymore. They couldn't keep up with it. All these DOM methods, they had to write a lot of DOM stuff, and then at a certain point it doesn't scale anymore. But this is for a Facebook size, and if you just have your own block, you probably won't need it. I can understand it's really nice to have it, but you really have to realize up front if it's really worth the investment in all that technology and then the complexity that it brings.
But that goes back to the how you can write those things yourself and then learn from it. Doesn't mean that you should always do it, but for learning purpose, I think it's a great advice there.
It is,
so Danny, where can you find you? Where can we find you online?
Well, you can find me on dannymoerkerke.com, which is my blog, and most of the articles from that I write in other places will be there. I'll probably also write some stuff only there. So that's what I do. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Twitter. Well, like Medium, I said, I'm Medium. I also have a profile. You can find all my articles there.
Okay, perfect.
And,
so on the Hackflix, we're gonna also have all your links there.
Sure.
Should be able to find. So people, thank you.
Thank you for having me.
We have it,
was a pleasure.
I think. In a few minutes, we were able actually to unpack a lot of stuff. I love that. Those are great conversations. So
thank you.
Hopefully we talk again when you have you made that move. You built these helped hundreds of companies, and then we can learn from that process. Because I think what you're doing from an outsider point of view, I'm like. This will but there is no way this can't work. It will just take you to where you want to go, because it's about community, and people will help you get there because you help them by providing them some nice tips here and there.
I said, it cuts both ways. You help people, you get something back in return. So it's very rewarding, and again, when you teach, you learn as well.
Great. Okay, thanks. We have it.
Thank you.
So just check that.
Thank you very much.